I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends. I am giving you these commandments so that you may love one another. It seems that all I've done since coming to the Diocese of New Westminster is to preach, for the most part, on the Gospel of John, in particular on passages from the farewell discourses. The farewell discourses are chapters 13 through 17 in John, in which Jesus, on the cusp of his arrest, crucifixion, and death, teaches, comforts, and challenges his disciples because, of course, he will be going away. He will be leaving them. One way to look at the preponderance of these kinds of passages in my preaching events is that this is simply a function of the time at which I entered the diocese and the kinds of events at which I've been asked to preach and to speak. Another way to look at this would be to imagine that God has a message for us in this, that God could be saying something to us about beginning our time together with the end in mind. And of course, this is apt, isn't it? For I will be your bishop, if all things go well, for only 7 years, a relatively short period of time in the world of episcopal terms of service, especially those known in this diocese, with Michael Ingham here 20 years. And so in thinking about this, I understand a bit about why Jesus said so many important things to his disciples as he felt the time grow short, very short, with them. But beginning with the end in mind is not the only thing we should or can do as a diocese and new bishop. We must also begin with the past in mind. One of the things I did in preparation for this synod, and just because I wanted to, was to make a visit to the diocesan archives. My motives, to be honest, were two: to learn about this diocese and this region, because it's not just Diocese of New West holdings there, it's the provincial holdings, to learn about both, about the times of great inspiration in both, as well as darker times in the history of both, and also to learn more about the episcopacy of David Somerville, because, well, I've become interested in him. And so I sat at a table and stared at the photos of Violet Silito, Violet being the wife of the first bishop of this diocese. So these were photos of trees and mountains, water, Aboriginal people, and little churches carved out in the wilderness. I encourage you to go see them. I also stared into the faces of Japanese families sent to internment camps. That was where I teared up, I think, for some reason. And the faces of a few lay Anglican women who insisted on going along with them. I don't know if you know that story. I then stared into the faces of Aboriginal children in residential schools, and then read a letter written by one of the heads of school describing how one Aboriginal child died of disease. It was quite detailed about what happened. And finally, I looked into the face of David Somerville, because I wanted to do that, a bishop who traveled to different areas of the diocese, staying with clergy and their families in their homes for a week at a time, getting to know people, and who was not only a champion for women's ordination, but was also an early advocate for the inclusion of children in the Eucharist right after baptism, instead of waiting until they would understand it all at the age of 12 or 13 or 40 or 85. I looked and I looked, I stared and I read. Yes, we begin with the end in mind, we must. But we cannot make a right beginning without an awareness of the past that we bring with us and that has a claim upon us. And so we bring both of these to our Synod Eucharist today. We bring our stories, and I'm talking about collective but individual as well, our stories of mistakes and brilliance. And we bring an urgency to get on with what is before us, and perhaps we bring a little kind of anxiety about what that's going to be. I do, at least. And in all of this, we also bring a desire to know what the Word of God is for us today, what Jesus has to say to us today, as once again we begin again, as we always begin again. And not surprisingly, the words of God are simple and direct, words that we've heard before, but that if we let them, can claim us anew now with the opportunities and real challenges before us. I choose you as friends, Jesus says. And as your friend, I mean to speak directly and plainly to you. That's one of his ideas of friendship. The other is pouring out. A friend pours out his or her life for the other. He says, I mean to speak directly and plainly to you, for I myself am God's own direct speech of love and challenge to you. And oh, by the way, because in me and through me, God has chosen you and loved you, you are to choose each other, choose one another, and to love one another as friends. In some of my early non-liturgical speaking engagements in the diocese, I was asked to say some things about myself, having been told that people want to get to know you. And so at two of those occasions, I pretty much laid it out. I pretty much told people who I was, some of which was communicated in quite a direct and plain manner. In fact, in one of the gatherings, there was a gasp at some of what I told people. When I did this, I wondered if I had said too much. You know how that goes. So at a social gathering, when I met a man who had been at one of those events, I introduced myself in this way, and you'll learn this about me. I joke when I'm a little nervous and trying to learn something. I said, "Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm the American who shares too much." He laughed as if his secret thoughts had been found out. I don't know if he's here today. He said, "Oh yes," he said, "cards all face up." And so, plain and direct, cards all face up from your new bishop, who, whether it is realistic or not, and I hope it's not unrealistic, does want to be your friend and wants you as friends. And I think there's some precedent in bishops in this diocese for this. These are the things I want you to know about what I've learned so far, and I truly emphasize so far, and what I bring to this office that at its best is supposed to be for you. And this office, if it has any integrity at all, is supposed to point beyond itself to an incarnate God who yearns to draw us into God's own community of loving friends, with the aim of extending that very love out into the world that will forever be craving it. So some of what I've learned. I've learned that this diocese has a unique vocation, a vocation born of its place in the West and its raggedy pioneer beginnings, a vocation shaped by that same pioneering spirit in its laity, in its clergy, and in many of its bishops. I have learned that this vocation has been marked by a kind of boldness, and at the same time has been marked by wounding, being wounded, and wounding others. It's all tied up together. That kind of brilliance and vulnerability and wound, it's all tied up, just like it is in the human person. It is a vocation now deeply tied to Aboriginal people and their experience, and the truth-telling and reconciliation that our lives as Christian people must be about. It is a vocation tied to the difficulty of being trailblazer, on women's ordination, on the significance of baptism, on the blessing of covenantal relationships. And it has always been, and will probably always be, connected to the range of mountains that separates us from eastern Canada and from the eastern United States, and all their more settled ways. Murmuring happens. As well as the sheer scale of those mountains and the sheer scale of the natural beauty that surrounds us on every side. Surely that shapes us. I have also learned, and this is a little bit different learning, that somewhere along the way, for whatever reason, many in this diocese have lost touch with their confidence that their parishes, that our parishes can grow and thrive. At times I feel as if parish leaders I'm with have actually fallen asleep to the possibility of growth that is right before them. And what I want to say about that is this: while not every parish can grow for various reasons, many can, and many of your parishes can. As many of you know, I believe with all my heart that we as a tradition have everything we need to grow among those looking for a way to be Christian in a particular way. It's not for everybody. A way that values freedom, beauty, liturgy, living tradition, mystery, the practice of prayer, a Christ-centered earthy spirituality, tolerance, and open-mindedness, and that's just to name a few. And so this leads me right into what I want to bring to you, really what I have to bring to you. And you're going to teach me more about this, but this at least is a start. I was sitting in my office with a priest of the diocese who had come to see me just to have some time with me, which I have treasured with those who've had the boldness to do that, and to pitch some ideas to see if he could get my participation in them, and in a sense, my personal and official sponsorship of them. He made his case, and it was a good one. And I was so enjoying the time just getting to know him, for lo, he was an amazing person, a person who would only have been out here in the West. At the end of his pitch, though, this is what I said. John, which is not his real name, and he knows who he is out there. John, do you know what has been the secret of any success I've ever had? And I cringed even as I said that word, success. John, do you know what has been the secret for me? The secret of any success I've ever had in the parish or in the diocese is focus. Focus on congregational development. And so this, friends, is what I know how to do and what I bring to you. It will not be the only thing I or we will do, of course, but it will be at the center of what I, as your bishop, will do my best to focus on, really on your behalf. I will focus on it with no distinction between so-called liberals or conservatives, with no distinction between so-called Anglo-Catholics or evangelicals, and with a zest for growth among the many cultures and ethnicities that is the gift of this diocese, with a zest for growing among people 35 and under. For I believe that all can have a vibrant life within the big tent of what I understand to be our Anglican heritage. What I am about now, and what I will be about until the day I leave my office, your office, is congregational development, praying about it, figuring out how to train people, clergy and laity in it, finding ways to resource it with money, setting up coaching and consulting systems related to it, shaping formation and engaging in deployment with it in mind, and more that we will create together as we go. And why will I do this besides just my native stubbornness? I will do this because I believe that it's in communities of faith, that it's in parish churches, that people experience the beauty, the mystery, and the loving friendship of God. I will do this because I believe that it's in communities of faith, that it's in parish churches, that people actually learn to befriend others, especially those who are not like ourselves or themselves. I will do this because I believe that the peace and justice making we do begins with those right next to us. And I will do this because I believe that our Anglican identity is an identity that can uniquely hold all of this with its power to express, to integrate, to heal, to connect, to inspire, and to adapt while staying true to our ancient Christian roots. I do not call you servants any longer, Jesus said, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends. I am giving you these commandments so that you may love one another. As David Somerville approached the centennial celebration for this diocese, the 100-year anniversary of the consecration of Violet Silito's husband, the first bishop of New Westminster. He was interviewed about the decade since his own consecration. Bishop Somerville was asked, so what do you make of this last 10 years of your own time? These are some of the things he said about the church that he so loved. His words, I believe, touch on what is before us as we begin our life together, as we always begin again. He describes a community of love in parishes and in the diocese, both of whose vocations is actually the transformation of the world. Here are his words. Our relationship with people, Somerville says, at its best is expressed in love. The theme I've promoted in the diocese for 10 years has been one of a loving community. What are some of the specific things the church can do to make the world more human, more caring? That's the business we're in. Christ didn't die for the church, he died for the world. Jesus said his friends, us, were to be in the world like salt. Salt was in those days a preservative and a disinfectant, preserving what is good and preventing infection. He said we were to be like light and to let it shine. Light drives away darkness, banishes fear, and illuminates truth. And he said we were to be like a city set on a hilltop, a model, a pattern, to set an example of what a loving community would look like.